Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the many insightful sessions at the Economic Times Future Forward Southeast Asia Summit. The last 3 years have been all about zigzagging from office to remote to hybrid and back, depending on what path the pandemic took. Though it's difficult to say with certainty what work will look like in 2022 and beyond, yet organizations and leaders need to be agile when it comes to shape shifting and designing work. So, from office to remote to hybrid and back, what will work look like in 2022? Let's hear it from our panelists. Joining us for this interesting session are Iskandar Shah Zulkarnain, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer at Bank Islam, Malaysia. Iskandar is a seasoned HR leader with over 16 years of experience and brings with him professional experience in strategic human resource management. We also have Patrick Wu, who's Director of Human Resource at Steelcase Hong Kong. Patrick is a veteran in leading and partnering with global teams across Asia, North America, and Australia. He's passionate about people, supporting each individual's development and achievements by applying his long-standing experience in leadership, strategy, and change management towards building talent and capability across organizations. We also have Sarina Aby Bakar, who's the Chief Human Capital Officer at Telekom Malaysia. Sarina leads Telekom Malaysia's human resources and is responsible for driving TM's people strategy and fostering a vibrant culture transformation to realize TM's aspirations as a human-centered technology company. And finally, we have Gayatheri Silvarkumer, who's the Chief HR and Talent Officer APAC at McCann Worldgroup. Gayatheri wears multiple hats, including, but not limited to change management professional, HR business partner, strategy development partner, staff advocate, hiring manager, and more. Welcome Iskandar, Patrick, Sarina, and Gayatheri to the session.
Thank you, Shweta.
Great. Thank you all for joining us. I think we have a very interesting topic to discuss, so let's dive straight in. My first question is to all of you. The world of work is now getting back to normal, but needless to say, the COVID era has been an eye-opener for many of us, in fact, all of us. And those learnings are still worth keeping. So what are your primary takeaways from the crisis? Sarina, would you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Shweta. I think this is the hot topic nowadays, right? So for TM, for Telekom Malaysia, as we know, the pandemic accelerates the remote trend of working, and we're not immune. Before the pandemic period, we have this flexible working schedules, etc. But remote working is more like triggered by the employees and run by the employer. The last 2 years has taught us quite a bit of things from Q1 2020 until Q1 2022, right? The last 2 years. What we learned, Shweta, quite interesting. Productivity was not compromised. In some areas, productivity improved. Maybe because, employees spending lesser time on the road, they spend more time at work, and we also find job satisfaction grow higher. Employees say they can blend their personal and professional lives better. However, over that 2-year period, we find other learnings. After some time, the Zoom fatigue sips in. And then, people feel that, they became overwhelmed, the burnout came in. And we also found that, and we know very well, not everyone has the right environment at home that is conducive for them to work optimally. And we also, as an organization, we like to bring back some of our employees for that physical collaboration, that energy, etc. But the third piece that we found, Shweta, was that new employees struggle to assimilate fast into the organization during that pandemic period. So we look at our employer needs, we look at our employee needs, and look at the products, the solutions, our delivery to the customer, and being very cognizant about it. We made decision to go 60% of our employees on hybrid way of working. So we went on 3-2 until today. So it's like 3 days at work and 2 days at the office. and the manager take full accountability to make sure it goes seamlessly. Another learning, Shweta, that I think will continue to be very, very important, especially so in the near future, is organization providing that technology, that collaboration tools, so that the employees can go in and out of this physical and virtual work environment seamlessly, because we know very well the remote working, the hybrid working is here to stay.
Very true, Sarina. Thank you for touching upon that aspect of technology and collaboration tools. Iskandar, I would want to come to you next, and would you share with us what are your primary takeaways from this crisis, when it comes to employee engagement or the impact on business?
Hi, Shweta. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. So the journey that Bank Islam undertook was quite interesting, because just before pandemic hit us, we were actually, just exploring the different options when it comes to flexible work arrangements. And I think I wouldn't have gotten as much buy-in if not for the crisis. So there was a bit of a blessing in a way that it helped facilitate different views or different approaches towards the way that we work. One of the things that we were trying to advocate, inculcate with the team is to have higher agility. And being a bank, traditionally, it seemed as very structured, very rigid, very processed, which then perhaps is the opposite of trying to advocate for agility. But the last 2 years actually demonstrated that actually the team has a lot of agility. Many of us were able to quickly shift and respond, because the bank had to keep running. It wasn't the type of business that could close the shutters like how the government was imposed the various forms of lockdown. The bank continued to operate, and we had to find ways to make sure that we could still deliver services to our customers with a lot of restrictions, right? So it actually proved that there was a lot of agility in the organization, and that's something that we need to harness a lot more. The other point I would like to echo Sarina is around the engagement, right? Because what we felt that maybe in the beginning, as we were trying to scramble around, trying to react to the whole situation, we may have left the engagement piece to chance, depending on the strength of leaders at the respective areas of work, the different teams. The degree of engagements were done at different levels, right? And having that for a prolonged period of time actually took its toll, right? So we needed to take control of and to make sure that engagement is being done deliberately, provide the right platforms, and make sure that we are able to reach out and stay connected to our various colleagues throughout the organization. More so because we are scattered throughout the country. We got 140 branches or so, and there were a lot of movement restrictions in the last couple of years. But all in all, I think it helped us realize that it's time for us to work differently, and that we need to have new ways of working. And to enable such different ways of working, we need to have the right tools. Otherwise, it just jams everything up, and people become frustrated, or our customers ultimately will feel the impact of it. So enabling them via the tools, that's also something that Bank Islam has invested a lot in the last 2 years, to make people's ability to serve even better.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Iskandar. Again, you stressed a very important point that an engagement needed to be looked at, and we, especially companies had to make investment in tools. So, Gayatheri, what was the learning for you at McCann? What did you focus on? Yeah.
Yes, for us at McCann Worldgroup, it was a crisis, health crisis, leadership crisis, business crisis, because we are a creative agency and we have to come together when we are doing ideation and production. And so the crisis was also around the employee engagement. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was no decrease in engagement for us. And we realized that's because prior to that, we were all going so fast with all that we were doing. So when the work from home came in for at least 1 or 2 months, we were slowing down. People were slowing down. People were relieved from work from home because they feel much better just having their space, right? Like you're not rushing in the office. It reduced because the reduction in the commuting and the expenses. There was more time for them to spend with their family and weaving out their entire day-to-day stuff within the day as they like. So they took time to reorganize themselves. I mean, we did that. So after a few months, we realized it started declining. The work-life balance for some people was an ideal situation with the work from home, but for some it wasn't because of many, many changes, challenges that we were facing. As several topics became more relevant for us, like leadership has become increasingly important, as well as the sense of belonging in the organization. In the past, the awareness amongst the business leaders on employee engagement was very low. What they used to do is when you bring an issue and you tell them this particular function or this particular team is having a low engagement, we just address it as it is. And it's specific way of addressing it. But now it's become a general issue for us and it cannot be any more numbered. And the leaders have has learned to act quickly and faster and be very close to the pulses of people and what's happening. And again, in the past, when we talk to our employees and ask them what's their biggest issue, one of the major challenges they face, it was always about not having enough flexibility at work, i.e., working from home and remote. And the pandemic came and it just changed overnight, and everybody started working from home, and a hybrid came culture working place. And then we realized that we don't have to travel. As a regional leaders, we don't have to travel really to be in the location to engage and to do business and to do the creative works that we have to do. Of course, when it comes to production, it's a completely different story. And then we learned a different way of doing this. So it actually challenged our status quo, which we have been like sitting for a long time. And we realized we can engage without being there in person. And presence doesn't mean you have to be physically there. There's a lot of way of how we engage people. So we learned that. The dynamic of the relationship between us, the employer and the employee, and also amongst the employees has changed altogether. It showed us the value of pre-existing relationship at work, which was critical when we had to work remotely to generate the same results when we worked in person. And now when we talk about digital tool, being our agency and a network, we are a little bit advanced when it comes to investment in terms of digital, but obviously on some other areas we were not. And it just became like the tools and the digital tools and the tag that we had was more like not just having a happy conversation anymore, not just a nice call or an email. It was beyond that. It was adjusting ourselves to come together and be on the screen together. Some are not going to put their face on the screen, not going to show. Some is okay, they're fine, they're going to do it. But then somehow we have to just engage them. Luckily, the technology is evolving, even though we are still a little bit backwards in some of those tools that we should be implementing, and we should be going faster to integrate all the way we work. But we're still very thankful to a lot of new things that's come in, and we have adapted to that. Talking about connection, people did not know how to interact. Definitely, the early days was like, oh God, it was draining all of us. It was literally burning us, and especially people who were working with clients. So much employee burnout that was going on. Back in the days when we were doing back-to-back meetings in person, it was already a lot for us. It was exhausting, and let alone doing this on the screen for hours. So the lesson learned that in this past 2 years, we have put together, and we have made this into a tip sheet and to help people to manage how they work remotely, how they handle the team, how they handle the customer, how do they navigate the difficult conversation online, has helped our team a lot, helped us to become really better. And of course, after 2 years, what I see now, the brain has started to adapt. While all this cannot be replaced with a real conversation, we still have learned to interact with each other remotely. We have learned to work people with remotely. There's one other thing which I've kind of recognized is that something that we don't usually talk is the inconvenient truth about a lot of people did not feel engaged at work even before pandemic. And doesn't mean that they were not happy with their job or they didn't have job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is different, engagement is different. They can be happy at work, but they probably not happy with the company. So we recognize that. And during the pandemic, we actually recognized a lot of that. A lot of the signs started showing up. So we've come together to make plans, and we realized that the small wins and lots of small celebrations are the one that's bringing people together. Obviously, there are other financial components to this, right? Like what do we do in terms of a compensation? How do we manage that? How do we become really competitive compared to our competitors? But it's a different thing. But then there's also a human connection that we constantly worked on to manage this. So this term is going to be there. We have come out of it, and I do believe that the hybrid work culture, all this lesson learned that we have put together now, like a book that we always constantly look at, and the insights is helping us to drive the future.
Great. Thanks for those extensive learnings, Gayatheri. Patrick, how was the learning at Steelcase? What was the focus like on engagement? What are the lessons that you learned?
Thanks, Shraddha. First, I say I really appreciate what all three of my fellow panelists have said, because here in Steelcase, we have had very similar experiences, whether it's work from home challenges, increasing agility, a want for more flexibility, increased burnout. We've had similar experiences. But for me, I found the biggest learning is the need really then to focus more on empathy and more on agility amidst all this ongoing uncertainty. The pandemic has certainly leveled a considerable burden on most people and confronted them with a variety of issues and problems, challenges unique to their own situation and life. And many choose to address these privately, but often at times under incredible stress. In Steelcase, we have conducted monthly pulse surveys to assess those employee stress levels and also to assess engagement levels. Now, what's unsurprising is stress has been very high, and you can directly see the correlation to how the pandemic is challenging that particular market. But we've also found that our engagement levels have been equally very high. Now, despite all the pandemic challenges, this tells us our people are still very committed, and that's wonderful. And as such, the need for ourselves as a company and as HR leaders to sharpen our sense of empathy and tact has never been more important than right now, as to support these employees as they try and navigate through the challenges of working through the pandemic, but also trying to adjust or recalibrate themselves to what a post-pandemic work life should look like. Secondly, we know that the pandemic has accelerated the pace of change for everyone. Companies are seeking now to move as quickly as possible from this crisis management that when we started the pandemic to now preparing companies for profitability and for longevity. That's what we're trying to do now in Steelcase. We're trying to move towards that, and we're looking towards HR leaders and leaders in general as being tasked to guide and support this whole post-pandemic recalibration. Now, planning for this entails more than just thinking about, but also reacting to COVID just in isolation. You also have to consider this wide range of both internal and external pressures on the organization as the organization moves towards a path to try and meet its targets, its goals, its value proposition in this really quick and ever-changing world. Now, context really matters, and building a viable future requires looking beyond this short-term horizon. So for us, I think if you recognize the world is still unsettled, the pandemic and the impacts of the pandemic are continuing, this planning for post-pandemic, you need to acknowledge and recognize the needs of these individual employees, but also at the same time, continue to be highly agile. So you can continue to react and adapt to all this uncertainty. I have a saying to say the best way to manage uncertainty is to build agility. And that's what we've been trying to do here at Steelcase. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for sharing that. You wonderfully summed it up, how important agility has become right now, for organizations. Which kind of takes me to my next question. Since you touched upon the future-proofing organization is one of your many KRAs, as a HR leader, and one that most organizations are focusing on. So what were some of the challenges that you faced as a leader, and how did you overcome them? Sarina, would you want to share with us any best practices that you would like to share?
Yeah. On this space, I'm sure many organizations find, future-proofing the organization as, like you said, one of their KPIs, right?
Yeah.
And put a lot of emphasis on the HR leaders, especially, to do this well. So in our industry, for the industry that we are in, telecommunication technology company, we do a lot of upskilling and reskilling. This is to make sure, the skill sets that we have is always ahead of the corner of the growth areas that our leaders focus on, right? But the reality is technology evolves so fast, Shweta. The rate of change, or the speed of technology change, is very rapid. So a few things that we have done in the past, we need to double down and do it differently. And we put it into three, prong approach. The first one, we say we need to hire right. I mean, this is not new, right? But hire right for the skill sets that you want now and possibly in the next few years. But another thing that we focus on is that learning agility, that aptitude of learning, putting in consideration that technology evolves very fast, right? So you need your talent to be very agile and have that learning agility here, so that they learn very, very fast. The second piece that we do is to inventorize our skill sets, so that we know what we have now, and we look at where do we need to be, what kind of skill sets that we need for the growth areas that we put our strategies on, and then we look at the gaps that we have. So inventorize our skill set, hire the right people with the right agility. And the last piece is about upskill and reskill. So doing all this together, we aspire to be that talent creator. We can't perpetually depending on the outside market to provide us with that skill set that we need. We need to take charge of it. We need to do the inventory. We need to do right upskill and reskill, and ultimately be the talent creator that will give us that advantage, that leverage, as our organization continually looking at the new growth areas to make sure we continue to be competitive to in our market.
Great. Thanks for sharing it, Sarina. Indeed, future-proofing, major component is reskilling for future-proofing organizations, and you very rightly touched upon that. Patrick, would you want to share, what is the focus when it comes to future-proofing, at Steelcase? What are you focusing on? Yeah.
Sure. For us, the major challenges have really centered on three things. It's been on morale, talent, and performance. Now, after working from home during the pandemic, most employees have grown skeptical that they need to be in a traditional office to get work done. I think this was mentioned a bit earlier. Employers now, we must acknowledge that employees want to exercise this right to work from home on a more permanent basis. And as leaders and as HR, we have fewer convincing arguments to refuse this request. Now, what was happening during COVID and what is happening now post-COVID? During COVID, it's very simple. Employees work from home. Employees continue to deliver results. Employees experience this new sense of autonomy and freedom. Post-COVID, they just simply want this to continue. And now they have leverage. Employee influence is growing, and subsequently, they have a stronger voice. So when we think about this, recalibrating this post-pandemic workplace, if you will, these employee expectations must be considered. If we as a company and as HR are unable to manage or meet these expectations, then we run a very high risk of the possibility of impacting morale, losing talent, and diminishing the ability of employees to perform. These risks are very high. So what have we at Steelcase have done about this? Well, firstly, it's about increasing employee choice and control over where they work, providing more flexibility, and therefore improving productivity. Employees have worked this extended period of time over the pandemic, and they know how to deliver their work, and they have this greater sense of autonomy. Employees have a better understanding for themselves now of the impact of space and environment on their own individual productivity and well-being. They know what works for them. They know how they can be productive while at the same time maintaining the sense of well-being that they're comfortable with. And that's that work-life balance. So we have to recognize that as companies. Now, here in Steelcase, we're all about designing workspaces. So we've taken our own advice and we've incorporated this into our design principles as we prepare our workspaces for our employees in this post-pandemic, if you will. And we have 4 principles. And the first one, I'll get into more detail. The first one is just me plus we. Second is fix to fluid. Thirdly, open and enclosed. And fourthly, braiding the digital with the physical. Now, first, the me plus we, what does that mean? We're ensuring that we equally support individual work and teamwork, and we can quickly shift between the two. People want that freedom to work for themselves and are productive in doing so, but they also need to collaborate. So we can't forget that. So we're trying to find a new balance of that me and we space. Fixed to fluid, that simply means for us to be adaptable and have a flexible workspaces that can support multiple purposes. So we can move furniture around, we can move the space around, we can create new spaces that allow us these different types of work environments depending on need. Open and enclosed, we're providing open team spaces and enclosed me or individual spaces that provide both individual control and privacy options for our employees. And finally, digital and physical, I think this was touched upon before as well. It's just increasing the use of video, but making sure when we do that, we have inclusive experiences for those that are working remotely and not part of that physical group. We can do all of this at the same time and together. And you can see that the whole world is talking about these things. The employee is talking about how they can continue to work from home. Employer, we're talking about these new hybrid models and how we can structure this to make sure that we have the business continuity that we need. You see governments and regulators, they're trying to involve labor laws to prepare for increased work from home and make sure that it's safe and employees have the proper rights to do so. And finally, we see it in the labor market where there's a lot of employees are switching jobs. And we know this is happening because companies are failing to meet those expectations. And that expectation, again, circles back to employees wanting choice and control of how they work, where they work, when they work. And we're trying to adapt to that.
Thanks for sharing those 4 principles, Patrick. They're very interesting. And ultimately, you rightly said that, yeah, it's about increasing employee choice. And those 4 principles, they kind of very well, kind of say that, yeah, this is how we are giving more choice to employees. Thanks for sharing those. Sarina touched upon a very interesting, aspect of learning and upskilling, being a part of future proofing. So Iskandar, I'm going to come to you here because I guess a lot will now depend on how the employees, they're being provided with learning and upskilling solutions. And it's not just the L&D leader's responsibility, but I think even the CHRO and the CEO have to be involved as well. So how do you plan to change the learning landscape? What changes have you made? What are the outcomes you are seeing? If you would want to share some details with us.
So one of the things we did right in the midst of, in the last 2 years, is to look past the storm. So instead of just, circling around what's happening in the immediate phase, we looked at what Bank Islam is going to be like in the next 5 years. And we came up with a clear plan. This is where we're going to be. And from there, we were able to then paint a clear picture to our colleagues in Bank Islam in order for us to be that bank in the next 5 years, what kind of skills do we need? And we are then able to paint a journey, or rather bring clarity to them on what's the journey of how we're going to get there. And a lot of the skills were naturally related to digital, right? And so what we did in 2021 was to launch our Digital Academy. And actually, one of the principles that we adopted as far as learning is concerned, one is to inculcate this behavior of self-driven learning. We want Bank Islam staff to learn because they see value in it, they want it, and they go for it, as opposed to a minimum standard that HR sets you've got to do every year. So we wanted to move away from that I do because I'm told to a more self-driven, individual-led learning experience. So in order to do so, and traditionally Bank Islam used to just gather people into a room and do face-to-face training. What we then needed to do is to bring accessibility. So to bring accessibility, we needed to have the right tools. Despite the limitations of remote working or not being able to move as freely, we decided to roll out a cloud-based HR solution, which then gave very quick accessibility to the various Bank Islam staff throughout the country. We also decided to make learning to be in smaller bite-sized content. And so the combination of all this, having clarity of where we're going to go, what kind of skills we need, providing the platform for people to learn, curating the content so that people have access to the right learning materials, and really advocating it through role modeling, right? So we have also shown that not only are we expecting our colleagues to learn, at the leadership level, we are also learning, be it remotely. It's okay. We learn well. And actually, we have learned a lot of things. We learn about cloud more so in the last 2 years than what we have been learning conceptually before. And in the last 2 years, we've also worked on our digital bank offering. Actually, it was just as recent as yesterday. We were very proud to have released our digital proposition for the youth segment called BU. And all of this was done in the process of us learning and actually rolling things out using a very agile way of working, adopting many of the principles of the agile methodology. So it's one thing to learn through learning platforms, but it's also about experiencing the fact that actually we can do things, and as we do it, we're actually picking up new skills and new experiences as we go along. So it's providing the platforms to learn. It's providing that role modeling. It is also providing that experience, and in doing so, people will actually be able to practice whatever that we are advocating, whatever that we are learning is not just on paper, but something that we can actually translate to real work.
Great, thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Iskandar. Gayatheri, how has learning been shaping up at McCann? Yeah.
So as we have seen through our work, our HR team was initially trying to resolve all the issues around new policies, procedures to manage a new way of working. But we realized this kept changing, ultimately only leading to additional problems, especially now with the landscape is changing so fast. At the same time, we realize one size fits all approach is not going to work for us, especially in our creative agency, where we are looking into innovation every day in and out. And so to be truly effective in this new normal, then we believe leaders needed to adjust and develop a new core capability, a complexity mindset. And we divided our learning experiences into 3 stages. And the first phase was about shifting, adapting, and coping. This was the most crucial thing we leaders needed to learn. We had to learn first so that we could guide our people and stabilize the new way of working. Inclusion was one of the most significant missing elements during the remote work phase. So with an open strategy where we crafted the principles around it, involving innovative ideas and initiatives that gradually reduced disruption, we brought in our people, experts, suppliers, customers, and we adapted best practices from our competitors as well. So programs on remote leadership, remote team engagement, collaboration, integrated learning with customers on presentation, and how do we brand our products, or do we create a brand strategy, digital and tool adaptation, cybersecurity, mindfulness to show respect to one another, and continued providing meaningful coaching and mentoring. And this was the first phase, and it took a bit of time to stabilize, and we continued to support this learning initiative along with wellness and psychological support. The second phase was stabilization through inclusion. So we began working on collaboration and belonging to 2 significant programs. One is called Day for Meaning, and the other one is Learning Week. So Day for Meaning is an expression of conscious inclusion that fuels innovation and then incorporates inclusive behaviors throughout our network. This annual event brings together virtually about 20,000 of our people worldwide, and connects and shares strategies for more inclusive workplace. So in APAC, about 2,000 people participated with about 125 groups and being moderated with about 100 people. So from that, we kind of like came out with a lot of ideas, and these actions have resulted in behavior change within our agency network. Solutions were built, launched, and shared across the market using employee-generated ideas, such as social and environmental cues to reinforce the practice of conscious inclusion in everyday discussion, inclusive tech, the email language that we should be using, the empathetic and the inclusivity that we need to show, and the integration of conscious inclusion into our global operating system. And the learning week was for a week, and it was themed after making learning a habit to instill a continuous learning habit and prevent remote work from becoming a barrier to learning. Our president shared a 2-minute video about his learning style and habits. So he enjoys listening podcasts while he's doing his morning runs. So that kind of like inspired all the other leaders to share how do they learn, what is their learning style, what's their learning habits. And similarly, we did that in all the markets, and all people came together sharing their learning habits. And we hosted a variety of web series, trainings, global, regionally, and locally. And right now we are the 3rd phase, where our learning journey is a blended learning program that includes safe return to the office, continuous coaching and mentoring on hybrid culture, leadership, team collaboration, and integration of our new business approaches framework with our clients. And our skills-based programs are aligned to our new version of becoming agency of tomorrow. And we are seeing the fruition of our efforts with the recent Pulse survey results, which showed very good engagement and slowly showing a bit of a decrease in our attrition rate, indicating that we are doing the right thing to retain our talents.
Great, thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Gayatheri. I think we're almost, out of time. So I'm just going to quickly come to the last question that I had for all of you. Quickly, in one line, I would want to know from all of you one piece of advice, from you to the new CHROs who are preparing for this changed world of work. What is that one line that you're going to say to them? Sarina, we could start with you. One line for your advice.
To me, remote working is here to stay. Don't sweat. Hybrid working is here to stay. Make decision what kind of hybrid, what kind of remote. that you want your employees to go through, but focus on technology. We should be able to go in and out of this digital and physical world, the phygital as people call it, seamlessly. So focus on technology that augment our connectivity, our relationship with the employees so that we can do this hybrid or remote working much better in future. You heard about metaverse. Many organizations are into this already. So I think technology will be key in terms of how successful we are in terms of managing the future of work. And the other piece, I think, Shweta, that is very important, people and culture. People are going to be the biggest differentiator. Culture is going to give that behavior and environment for people, for us to unleash their full, potential. So upskill, reskill, to me, that would be very key. Agile way of working. At PM, we are really embracing agile way of working. And at this very moment, we are transforming our organization into agile at scale. Last but not least, that culture. You see on my screen at the back there, we have, a tagline that we say, hashtag ini cara kita. It's a culture that we want our employees to embrace so that, we increase the tempo of execution. We say, we own it, we care, we innovate, and we grow. This is our way of transforming the organization to be a human-centered technology company.
Great, thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Sarina. Patrick, what would be your piece of advice?
I've said it, I'll say it again. Focus on agility. Agility is a necessity now. It enables us to be more for quicker decisions, quicker actions. It provides greater perspective on the different challenges, and it allows us to better tailor solutions that really fit the needs of our employees and their workforce and the company. Beyond that, I would say never forget that employees, people, are the glue of any organization. Make sure we continue to nourish those social connections. People are feeling disconnected right now. They're expressing a desire to have more face-to-face, more interactions. Nurture that. Don't forget that. And I would say also, we also know that people have expressed a desire to continue to decide when and why they go to the office. So shift to greater intentionality to understand why and when and how people commute, how they travel, and how they use the office. And finally, offer greater choice and control. I've said that again. I think allow people the opportunity to experiment amongst themselves and what works best for them and for the organization, and find that balance that you're not only finding the productivity that the business needs, but ensuring that as individual employees, they also get the well-being support that they need to be able to respond.
Great, thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Patrick. Iskandar, what would be your advice?
Yeah, so for me, uncertainty, changes, crisis, these are things that will happen again. Right? Over with this crisis, there will be another, that may come in the future. So CHROs need to really play a very strong leadership role. We shouldn't be on the sidelines waiting for somebody to tell us what we should do. We should get ourselves in there, take charge and lead, because we are then shaping the response. We are then the ones that are going to make sure that our employees are attended to. We are the ones who will make sure that there is resilience in dealing with that crisis. So the CHRO has to step up even more, in times of crisis. And I think we also really need to look at adopting this concept of being very flexible. Solutions that HR produces cannot be that policy-driven, really just cookie cutter style. It really has to be relevant, it has to be flexible, and that can be serving the needs of the employees or the organizations at a particular point in time. And it needs to be one that helps build the organization in the longer run.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Iskandar. Finally, Gayatheri, your piece of advice.
Consider doing a conceptual framework or a simple mental map to help you reflect on the expectation and guide you in making sense of it before you can start elaborating a meaningful strategy. It could be people strategy, it could be any strategy that you're working on. And think far, use your imagination and see if this is going to be a future-proof thing. Have the ability to recreate and change as needed to allow the business and organization to shift as needed. Always pause, reflect, and re-strategize. This is my personal mantra. I'll tell you, it works so much for me. When something doesn't go as I planned, or it just goes literally in the other side of what I wanted, I always pause, reflect, and re-strategize. It has worked so well. And the last one is insights from lesson learned can be especially useful. This will give you reassurance and serve as a reference point. When we are forced to consider whether your plan is future-proof or it's going to work on the ground when you put it into play, it's that lesson learned that will give you that exact insight that you need and will give you the right instinct whether you're doing the right thing or not.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Gayatheri. I think with this, we come to the end of our session. It was a very interesting discussion. For me, the key takeaways have been about agility, about increasing employee choice, about increasing tools and technology, and finally, focusing once again on engagement and culture. Thank you once again, all of you, for joining us. Next, we have a very interesting session on driving diversity, equity, and inclusion in the future workplace with Melanie Bakar, who's the Chief Diversity Officer at Google. Stay tuned. Thank you, all of you, once again.